When the American motorcade rolled through the streets of Beijing recently, it wasn't just bringing diplomats, it carried the weight of the U.S. financial system. Among the delegation were the architects of American tech supremacy, leaders like Tim Cook and NVIDIA's Jensen Huang. Huang's company alone reached a market valuation of $5 trillion this year, a figure larger than the entire Indian stock market. Despite this concentration of American corporate power, the diplomatic tone was uncharacteristically reserved. President Trump, typically known for his aggressive stance on trade, publicly referred to Xi Jinping as a great leader during the visit. On the surface, the U.S. retains its position at the top of the hierarchy. This data shows the U.S. economy leading with a nominal GDP of $30 trillion, roughly $10 trillion ahead of China. This lead, backed by a global network of military bases, supports the view of America as the world's only superpower. However, the presence of these CEOs reveals a deeper reality. These industry leaders travel to Beijing because they realize their companies are caught in a strategic trap. The theoretical lead on paper is being neutralized by a physical dependency on the ground. For years, the prevailing view of China was that of a manufacturing hub, a place to build cheap versions of Western designs. That perception is now outdated, as Beijing has surpassed the U.S. in research, development, and high-tech innovation. This shift is reflected in intellectual property data. China is the first nation to cross the 5 million mark for valid invention patents, moving well ahead of the total filings in the United States. These filings focus on the sectors that will define the next decade. 60% of these patents are concentrated in strategic industries, like robotics, green energy, and artificial intelligence. This dominance in the laboratory translates directly to the factory floor. While American companies may design the software, they remain reliant on Chinese facilities to build the physical hardware that powers our world. Even as Apple and Tesla attempt to diversify, the majority of their global production and battery supply still flows through Chinese infrastructure. The actual execution of modern technology has become a Chinese specialty. This dependency extends far beyond consumer smartphones. It reaches into the core of global security, the manufacturing of advanced weaponry and the raw materials they require. China currently handles 30% of all global manufacturing. More importantly, they control 90% of the global processing capacity for rare earth elements, the minerals needed for smartphone screens to electric vehicle motors. The impact of this monopoly is becoming clear as the U.S. military faces a supply crisis. High-intensity conflicts in the Middle East have depleted American stockpiles of interceptor missiles and Patriot batteries faster than they can be replenished. This creates a direct bottleneck for the Pentagon. Rebuilding a single F-35 stealth fighter requires 900 pounds of rare earth minerals. To build a naval destroyer, that requirement jumps to over 5,000 pounds. Beijing has already demonstrated its willingness to use this leverage. When the U.S. previously attempted to impose trade restrictions, China responded by limiting its export of these rare earth minerals. The move effectively forced the U.S. government to step back from those trade policies. The U.S. defense industry now finds itself in a position where it must rely on its primary rival for the very materials needed to maintain its fleet and deter conflict. Beijing is no longer cautious about displaying this strength. They are currently testing 6th-generation fighter technology and have begun using national security laws to block American acquisitions of tech startups. Their defiance is also visible in the diplomatic arena. China has openly ignored American sanctions on Iranian oil, and they are now implementing domestic rules that penalize companies for following U.S. trade restrictions. This resource control directly impacts the geopolitical stability of Taiwan. If a conflict breaks out, the U.S. supply chain for high-tech missiles and jet parts would effectively freeze. Beijing knows that this mineral monopoly makes any prolonged American military intervention in the region economically and logistically impossible. While the United States faces growing friction with its traditional allies, China is expanding its reach through infrastructure projects across the global south. From ports in Africa to mining rights in South America, they are securing the inputs for the next century. Control over the physical world, the mines, the processing plants, and the patents, has shifted the balance of power. Leadership is no longer determined by the size of a fleet, but by the ability to keep that fleet operational. Beijing has secured that control by becoming the world's indispensable provider.